business owner, entrepreneur, video creator, flexibility, work from home, make my own schedule. Most of these things people don't equate with social work. I am actually a social worker. Here's the story about where I came from and how I got here. So I figured today would be a great day to tell you the story about how I became a social worker. This will be like part one in a little mini series. And yeah, I've never really talked about that before, and so why not? And don't mind me, I'm currently stretching, and that's because I had a water slide accident. About a month ago. I slid down a water slide. I tried to slide down a water slide. Who tries to slide down a water slide? You should just be able to do it. Anyway, I tried to slide down, you know, like one of those really steep ones. And for whatever reason, instead of coming off the slide normally, I came off the slide like a stick, and I went straight to the bottom and hit both of my heels really hard on the bottom of the pool. And mind you, the pool was like 4 feet deep, so it was a pretty big impact. That was the first day of vacation, so I've been walking on my toes ever since. And that was about a month ago. And then coming back from vacation, I had to get an x-ray and a CT scan. Thankfully, nothing is broken, but I've not been able to run in about a month. And that is something I really love to do. And I've been walking around on my toes. So my entire legs are super sore. They feel like out of place, and I probably need to get physical therapy. But just the other day, I got clearing from the doctor to try to run. She said, as long as it doesn't hurt, you can go for it. But they do still kind of hurt. So today I'm gonna ride my bike to a park and see if I can run at least more than a couple of feet. So that's what we're gonna do today while I tell you this story. But let me actually just start with my first memories of my dream jobs. I think I was 5, 6, 7, something like that. And I wanted to be a paleontologist. I thought that I could just dig for dinosaur bones and get paid for it. And so my dream was to do that. I was gonna dig for dinosaur bones. I would walk around and tell everyone that I was gonna be a paleontologist. Not to mention, I felt really cool because I knew what that word meant. Well, I thought I did. And then the other one was to be a marine biologist. And this is because I thought that I could just go to the aquarium and look at sharks all day long. And these dreams didn't last very long because in 9th grade, my freshman year of high school, I got my first C in earth science. And that's when I realized these jobs were not for me. So I was actually gonna try to finish part of the story while riding on the bike, but there's no way. There's a highway directly to my left, and this thing I have the camera on is wobbling. So it's really loud and really shaky. We'll just wait till we get to the park to finish the story. Okay, now that we're actually here at the park and I rode my bike a little bit, I actually feel like I need to stretch again or I'm gonna hurt myself. I actually feel really nervous as I get ready to run. I'm gonna try to run on this grass field over here first because it's a little more soft, see if that works. And then we'll go for a couple of up and downs here on the pavement. And then if all that works, we'll try to go for a mile or two and see how that feels. But while we stretch again, why don't I tell you a little bit about high school? Because once I got my first C and realized marine biology or paleontology was not for me, this is actually around the time when I started to think about being a therapist. And like any other high school kid, you know, like my brain isn't fully developed. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But I started to develop a sense that I wanted to help people. And I had seen psychologists on TV, I've heard about therapists before, and I thought that being able to talk with people, get to know them, build relationships with them, and help them was really, really cool. And if I'm... Okay. That is an Amtrak train above my head. There are no quiet spots in New York City. I thought this was like a really nice secluded spot, and I forgot, it's an Amtrak bridge above my head. Anyway, so I thought that building relationships with people and talking to people and helping them through issues would be really, really cool. And if I'm being honest, that desire to build relationship and help people hasn't left me. I still have that. So anyway, in high school, that's when I started to really think about what that meant for the future, right? At some point in high school, you start thinking about college applications and where you're gonna go, what you're gonna do. And all throughout high school, that's what I was thinking. Ow, did something bite me? And I remember at some point in high school sharing this with my mother, who ironically enough is a social worker. She worked back then and still works for a nonprofit that helps children. Now there's a plane going by. When I first told her this, she's like, oh yeah, you want to be a clinical social worker. But because she was a social worker, I was so stuck in the idea that social workers do what she did. And what she did was really great, and it was great work, but that's not what I wanted to do. So I was like, no, I don't want to be a social worker. You know, I want to help people. I want to talk to them. I think I want to be a therapist. And she kept saying that you want to be a clinical social worker. And I said, nope, that's not what I want. And despite our disagreement, my mom continued to support me. And although she said you should think about social work as an undergraduate degree, I said no, and I ended up going to school for a psychology degree. All right, so I feel like I'm never actually gonna go on this run. I'm feeling quite nervous about it. So now I'm gonna have some water and a snack before I try it. So lo and behold, I ended up going to college. And I will say, before actually starting a psychology program, I did try human services, but as soon as I realized this was too close to social work, I said, no, I'm gonna switch over to psychology. So I did try to listen to my mom, but again, really quickly switched over to psychology. And those classes were really cool. I was learning about creativity, I was learning about sensation and perception. Although it wasn't directly related to like being a therapist, I found it really fascinating. And then on top, of that, I might not go for a run if I choke on this. And then on top of that, I was able to get some jobs. So I ended up working with children. I ended up working in an assisted living facility at one point. So in those experiences, I was building relationships and helping people. And so with the combination of psychology courses that I really liked and the practical work that I was doing with people, I thought to myself, well, maybe I want to be a clinical psychologist. Ooh, a PhD, a doctor, that sounds really nice. I also can't eat. Maybe I need to practice eating. A couple of people I was in college with were pursuing that route. They were dead set on it. And so I started to think that, yeah, maybe I want to be a clinical psychologist too. So what I decided to do was set up a meeting with my advisor to talk about my future plans. But one thing I knew for sure was that no matter what route I took, I was going to need a graduate degree. All right, here we go. We're actually going to go for the jog real quick on the grass. I'm really nervous. Let's go. So I'm gonna run on this pavement in just a second to see how that feels. But before I do, let me actually tell you about this meeting with my advisor, because this was a real turning point. So anyway, I set up the meeting, I think it was my junior year. And again, there's a plane. Okay. I think it was my junior year, and I was pretty set at that point that I was gonna be a clinical psychologist. So I marched into that meeting all excited, all proud. And the way I envisioned it is that I would go into the meeting, I would tell him about my plans, he would agree, tell me the steps to apply, which programs to apply for, and I'd walk out with a concrete plan, ready to start my clinical psychology journey. But this is not what happened. So I march in, I'm all excited, I sit down, and he of course starts by asking what I wanna do. And I start describing what I want to do. I want to help people. I want to build relationships. And yeah, and I just, I'm all excited about it. And he stops and he says, you sound like you want to be a clinical social worker. And I was like, no, this is not, I want to be a clinical psychologist. And so then what he started to do was describe to me a little bit more about what clinical social workers do. And probably because it wasn't my mom, I was able to hear it a little bit better. And because I've heard it so many times at this point, I was more willing to listen. So he starts describing to me what clinical social work is, how it differs from psychology programs. And he made it pretty clear that clinical social work was most likely a better option for me, considering my desires, than something like clinical psychology. And at that moment, I was like, I have to admit, I felt a little bit sad, a little bit bad, because my dreams of clinical psychology felt like they were crashing. But that's not what was happening. So anyway, I heard him out, I was able to listen, And I remember walking back to my dorm, and from there I started to do some research. I started to look up social work programs, what clinical social work was. For the first time, rather than just thinking I knew what it was, I did some research. And lo and behold, a lot of the programs I looked at, all the things about clinical social work were exactly what I wanted to do. And around that time, I decided, okay, I am going to pursue a social work degree, and I'm going to go for the clinical social work profession. And I can remember calling my mother and saying, hey, I just had my meeting with the advisor. I do think I want to be a social worker. And, you know, in one of those moments, she really supported me, but you can tell it was a I told you so moment. And that was a real turning point for me in college, and the moment where I decided, all right, social work is what I'm going to pursue. But it wasn't all smooth sailing from there for sure. All right, and like I said, we're going to try to run down here a little bit, and hopefully no one steals the camera, but most importantly, hopefully I can actually run and this doesn't hurt my feet. So I was actually able to run on the concrete without any pain. I did a couple of jogs down and back on that little path, and it felt pretty good. I think after this, I'm gonna go for like a full mile. This is exciting stuff. Wow, I'm so glad I'm recovering from this injury. So after that meeting, I decided, all right, MSW program, Master's in Social Work, this is what I'm gonna pursue. This is how you become a licensed clinical social worker. And so I did finish out my psychology degree. And for social work, it's not so important where you went, although the quality of the school and the education is important. It's not the #1 thing people look for or the most important factor in your career moving. No, another Amtrak train. Oh my gosh. And now all I had to do was figure out which school I was going to apply to. It's a golf cart, a tractor golf cart. I don't know what that is. And I really only had a couple choices considering I wanted to live at home, be in state, and save money on tuition. That led me to 2 options, which was UConn or Southern Connecticut State University. UConn is a great program with a great reputation. I was able to live at home and commute there. So lo and behold, that is where I decided to go. But the story doesn't end here. This was only the beginning of my journey, and I was about to encounter some roadblocks you would never even imagine.